This is a right little gem. It's not really a church, it's a chapel. But I tend to think if it's a Christian religious building, you can put it on the channel. It's a church. So there's quite a few things to get out of the way first. Firstly, you can see that it's a stupidly hot day. This was like the hottest day of the year. The ground's completely dry. Usually that would obviously be green, but it was just turned into a desert. And then the early shot right at the beginning, that was pure sunlight there. It wasn't editing, but it was sparkling. Anyway, it's in Gipping, so this is a little shot of the area right outside the church. Look at that, not a cloud in the sky. Rock hard fields. Must be like concrete down there. And super blue. Bugs flying around. I think the name Gipping is weird. It sounds like the kind of thing that happens on a dating app. It's like, oh mate, she totally gipped me. Or like, yeah, we were chatting well, but then he gipped me. I'm tired of gippers on this app. Just a traffic cone there. It's a nice scene other than that. And this is a little lake scene which is right outside below the church. This is on this day when it was so hot and dry, it was a proper swamp. Every time you tread in this muddy bank, there's just bugs flying out. There's a blue barrel there which makes it look like a Banksy painting or something. I just saw some ducks floating about there having a nice day, staying nice and cool. Oh yeah, and that house we just saw, it's kind of a Suffolk pink. Suffolk pink is a classic colour they used to use for all the houses. It's kind of a terracotta colour, but I mean that one's more pastel-y. Anyway, so when I showed up to this church, I mean, first thing you notice actually is that horrible tower. Usually the tower is the first thing you see from the road, but I wish I hadn't seen that one. But when I quickly just looking at this door, top right, and the top left actually, they're the logos of the family. The Tyrrell family who built the chapel in like the late 1400s. So when I showed up, there was just a wedding that just finished, so there was a bunch of people outside. And I thought, oh crud, I'm going to have to turn home because you can't do a church tour when there's anyone around for a start, but also when there's a wedding going on. But luckily it had just finished, which is why you see all these flowers around, and it had been nicely cleaned. And some people might have spotted a Cafe Nero cup in the entrance. Yeah, and so there was a woman who was like dismantling a few tables outside and stuff. And she said, oh, the wedding's just finished, you can go in, have a look around, make yourself at home. And I did, but, you know, I'd never expect to see anybody when I go to these things. So I was wearing like a crappy vest, which I've had for more than 10 years, which is basically see-through. Just some little short running shorts and my motorcycle boots. And it was properly hot as well, so I was sweating. I looked like I'd just come from a night out in Vauxhall. And I was going into a church. But anyway, we're looking at the floor here. Something interesting. See, look at the state of my... You can see there's dirt all over my arms. That's from sweaty, horrible dirt and flies and things wandering around that swamp. There's nothing under that brick other than a lot of time and history buried down. We're looking at this font now. Hang on a second. I'll look it up in my book. Yeah, it's from the 15th century, that's the 1400s, so basically I guess when the church was built. You can see it's got a bit of time behind it, and it's also been restored a lot. But one of the interesting things apparently about it is the pater ray, which is the wooden thing they used to cover the hole. Well, that's covered in a napkin at the moment, and it's got some flowers on top of it. I didn't realise that at the time, otherwise I might have tried to unwrap it, but I didn't, and so we just look at some flowers. And now, this is the eastward aspect, looking towards a nice stained glass and a big window, which we'll see in time. And you can see that the church, especially on a sunny day like this, is nice and bright with those huge windows. It's quite tall, but it's also quite stubby. So basically the walls are all window and there's a lot of light, especially with this white plastering. This is a 15th century ceiling, completely flat. And its panels are heavily moulded timbers. And you may be able to see there's a folded leaf motif on the wall plate. That's a bit, you can see it's got a bit of designery in the corners there. My book says that if you're looking at the ceiling, you will realise that the present roof was placed above it and the eastern wall heightened in consequence. But I'm not quite sure what that means because, I mean, roofs usually go above the ceilings, don't they? And then I jumped into this utility cupboard. I'm guessing that would be a medieval door, but it's been repainted, so it's kind of hard to tell its age. It's definitely medieval old construction. That's a fuse box, looks to be of modern construction. And then I like the look of this wall. I couldn't work out what it was made out of. It looks a bit like sort of lollipop sticks. I thought this was a good view. If I had a proper camera, I'm just using my phone. If I had a proper camera, I could make something nice of that shot and work with the light. But as it was out of focus. There was a bit of colour in there. There was a bit of an impression of what could have happened. See, I mean, this looks like it's sort of Jerusalem construction. Like that's how it would have been 2,000 years ago. Maybe that's what it is. It's like 500 years old. And so here we go, looking at the benches. I always like testing how solid they are, and I like when they're always smoothed down, almost like stone, by just people's greasy, acidy hands. And you see again, there's those logos. Look, there's the flower in the corner. There's the Tyrrell knot. I wanted a proper good look at all that history in the hands. Apparently the benches would have been painted back in the day, but they've been stripped. And these ones we're looking at, they're from the 1800s, and they're taken from the Gipping Chapel in a nearby church, which is in Stowmarket. And while we're looking at the benches, which aren't hugely interesting, it's worth talking about the Tyrrell family who used to own the chapel. It was a private chapel built for James Tyrrell, who was lord of the manor nearby, but the house is gone. It went in like 1850. It may have been built in the 1480s or earlier. My books aren't necessarily clear, but we can just say it was built in the 1400s. And James Tyrrell, he was executed in 1502. And that's because he was a friend and supporter of Edmund de la Pole, who was a descendant of the Yorkist line, otherwise known as the Plantagenets, who lost the War of the Roses. And that gave way to the Tudor dynasty, which we know today with King Henry VIII and all of that. Well, Henry VII actually, but you know. He gave way to King Henry VIII. And King Henry VIII gave way to nothing, famously, if you know what I mean. Wait. But that information's more than one video, so you have to look that up on Wikipedia for yourself. And weirdly, you might have seen, there was a coat of arms in the corner painted on the wall. For some reason I didn't film that, so I'll put a picture of it in. The coat of arms is noteworthy apparently for having two panthers in it. Which is a rare distinction given to commoners, it says in my book, but I can't quite work out what that means. They are of noble birth, I think. They're aristocrats, maybe, but they just weren't royal. And here we go, look, this is the rood stairs. So back in the day, there would have been a rood screen and a rood loft separating the two big rooms in the church. And they use those stairs to get to the top of it and put things up there, light candles and stuff. But obviously it's not there anymore. Those things always suffer in like the Reformation or the Civil Wars, interregnum and all those kind of things. Anyway, these are a nice perpendicular tracery with some simple OGs. I looked that up. It's pronounced OG, like Dr. Dre. And they're just nice perpendicular, typical style, quite plain. None of the messing about, but elegant in their own way, and obviously large, so they let a lot of light in. And it's the same deal here. Actually, these ones have got a little bit of design and interest at the top, but obviously, of course, it's stained glass. So back in the day, all of the windows, or at least more of them, would have been stained. But now it's just this one. Again, windows always suffer in the Reformation. You know, it's easy to go and pick on the rich guy, go to his chapel and chuck a few rocks at him. Luckily, this one hasn't been too smashed up. So there's St. John we're looking at now. He looks like he's just forgotten his keys. Mary, who looks a bit more upset about the fact Jesus is on the cross. But in the centre there, they would have had Jesus hanging up on the crucifix. Instead, they've got a few replacements with what are called instruments of the Passion. A crown of thorns, a spear, some nails. I had to look them up. There's 3 bishops here. I don't think we actually know who they are. One of them might be the Archbishop of Canterbury at the time, but it's just a guess. I like the fact they've got different sort of styles of faces. The guy on the left and in the middle, they look a bit more lowland, Netherlandish, and then the guy on the right, maybe, I don't know, Northern European. It's the same with St. John actually and Mary. But there's something interesting to note on the left-hand lower portion there. It's the Tyrrell family logo, which is like a boar with a golden peacock in its mouth. So we didn't have too much to look at on the floor earlier, other than a loose tile. But luckily they compensate for lack of Victorian tiles with this interesting carpet. I don't know anything about it. It looks like Iranian or whatever, but then they all do, because they all copy that Middle Eastern style. I mean, that's a sure sign that the chapel hasn't been renovated by the Victorians. Firstly, that painting on the left, which we might look at later, remains, but also the fact that the tiles are the same old plain white bricks. Or rather, there aren't any tiles there. I thought this was really cute. A little piscina, a niche with a statue in it, and in case you couldn't work it out, it's got Mary at the bottom. You're in a church, there's a mother and child statue. I wonder who that could be. Oh, right, it's Mary. I thought it looked like, in Toy Story when Andy writes his name on the bottom of their boots. To infinity and beyond. That's kind of like the Assumption of Mary in it, really. Some more fragments here in the glass. Just little colourful bits they put in there, why not? So you might have to go back and look again at that painting around the stained glass. You can see it on the right here. I don't know what I was looking at here. And that's another sign that the Victorians haven't renovated the place, because they would not have put up with that. That would have gone straight away. It would have offended their morals or something. So this is quite nice. This is a vestry. It's not quite clear what it's for. The guy in my book reckons it might have just been a priest's room, a chaplain's room, so that's someone who's just attached to the chapel. And you need to make a note of the space, or at least make a note of the time in the video where it appears, because we'll be looking at the outside later. So note the chimney hole, what's it called? Fireplace. You've got the windows there, it's nice. This is huge, it's a great little room. Obviously, what it lacks in horizontal space, it makes up for in vertical space. But if you wanted this kind of place in London, high ceilings like that, you'd be paying £800 a month just for a tiny room. It's got a period fireplace. And here we go, looking at the tower. So as I said, every book, they just say this tower is an absolute catastrophe, it's a monstrosity, and look at it. Just the contrast with the rest of the place. It's got really nice flush work. They put in some real effort to the flint. Some lovely designs we're about to see, and then they just whack that big old brick and stucco lump on it. I mean, looking at it earlier, I thought it was a bit like just Art Deco style, which is quite nice in its place. I love it in New York. But they've just lumped it onto this chapel. I mean, they put this vestry on here, which we were just looking at inside, and they've at least tried with the flint to make it match. I don't know what they were doing with those bricks there. But, that's the kind of renovation you want, the little addition. I don't know what they were thinking. But here we go, these are some nice original details. In the buttresses, in the windows, there's a good chance here to have a look at the head stops at the end of the arches there. And it just gives you a mostly unhelpful perspective on the window tracery. Looks like a Tyrrell knot again. I've seen a few of those. There's a few patterns which you can't really make out in the brickwork. There's a Tyrrell knot there again, that little triangle sort of shape. And there's probably one there too. It would have had flush work, some flint in it before, but that's gone now. And we can see there, remember I said to look at the vestry, and remember the proportions, that would have been a western facing window. I guess whoever was living there, he was obviously early riser, early sleeper, because the sun would have been coming in there in the evening. So rather than having curtains, it's just like, you know what, brick it up. And this is interesting, this is a door. You can't really see it, but that carving in the arch, it says, "Pray for Sir James Tyrrell and Dame Anne, his wife." My book says there's also the family motto, "Groin qui voudrait," which means "let him complain who will." But I couldn't really make that out. And you might be wondering, why should we be praying for James Tyrrell? Well, it's a long story, But basically, he was a good friend and supporter of Richard III, and Richard III usurped his brother, Edward IV, to become king, and then lost in the War of the Roses, and then he was taken over by Henry VII, who was father of Henry VIII, and then, we know that part. But he also confessed, apparently, when he was executed in 1502, apparently he confessed to the murder of these two boys here, the princes in the Tower, who were sons of Edward IV. So it's a bit sketchy. He was mates with the guy that became king after those two little boys were murdered because they couldn't become king themselves, they were the rightful descendants. So it's a bit of a wrong 'un, really. So, choose your prayers carefully. Anyway, we're looking now here at the vestry. And remember I said to look at the dimensions carefully and to remember them, because now we're looking at the outside and it's got some weird shapes going on. So this right here, this big flint work with all sorts of buttresses and OGs and shapes in it. That's the chimney. And these are interesting, these coats of arms. Interesting in the context. So these shields represent, I think, family union. So the one there on the far left, that's Clopton and Darcy. This is Darcy and Tyrrell on the left now. Then it's Tyrrell and Arundel. And then it's Arundel and Morley. And then the one on the far right, that's Tyrrell and Morley. And it's quite good if you want to go back and have a look at them. It's like one of those IQ games where you have to recognise the pattern, so you can work out which shield belongs to which based on the two unions. This one here gives it away a little bit. That one up the top with those two arrows, the little boomerang sort of shapes, that's the Tyrrell coat of arms. And as I said earlier, it's supported by apparently panthers. And then just take a while now to look at the good flint work, which is continued here. So look, a sort of checkerboard pattern. Interesting stuff on the buttresses, which are kind of octagonal, is that maybe hexagonal shape. The buttresses are the chunky things on either side holding it all up. And it gives you a chance to look at the tracery in the windows as well. This is the stained glass bit we're looking at, except from the outside obviously. There's that Tyrrell knot that appears again. And you get a good look at those chunky and ornamented buttresses in an interesting shape. It really is worth seeing the flint work close up. And I'm hoping we'll look again at the top where you can see there's a cross, which I had to look up. Apparently they're called wall anchors. So you can see those big black crosses there. Obviously the one in the right at the very top, that's crucifix, and that's kind of a shape we're all familiar with. But those black crosses, they're wall anchors, which support a lateral bowing, it said, which basically I think means the wall's falling down. And there we are, there's the outside. This is now the southern facing side. Yeah, that's right. And look at that lovely flush work just above the door there, around the windows, you can see, right in the centre. It really put some time and effort into it. Unlike this tower, we can see there, which really does look like a car park sort of surface. And then this is a hornet's nest, which the lady who was cleaning up pointed out to me. And she said to me, that'll ruin your wedding day. And I thought, yeah, it would. And there's enough of that. You seem to get a lot of bees at these churches. I remember I went to the one in, where was it? Ickingham or something. What was it called? I don't know. Oh yeah, Ingham. It was the one along the big main road. But all in all, this church here, Gipping, is lovely. It's definitely worth a visit. Just have a little look around the area. It's a lovely, peaceful place. And all the little details there really do repay a visit and seeing them up close. So there it is. I'll leave you now with big shining sun on the hottest day of the year.